Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Melbourne CocoaHeads number 142. This is the 12th of November 2020. We're starting at 6:30. That's about now. Let's go. Before we start, I want to say that Melbourne CocoaHeads acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations as the traditional owners of the land on which we live and work and broadcast CocoaHeads from. We recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. We pay our respects to them and their cultures and to the elders, both past and present. Like I said, this is Melbourne CocoaHeads number 142. These are all the various links you can get to CocoaHeads stuff. We've got a Twitter, we've got a YouTube. You've probably found the YouTube. Well done. Tonight, we've got three things. First up, Rick is going to talk to us about accessibility tips. Rick's got a background in talking about accessibility, so I'm looking forward to seeing what he has to say. RHYNO he's been working with Combine for a bit, and he's found some sharp edges, and he wants to let us know about it. And lastly, it's me, Hugh, and we're going to have a quiz. You'll need another device or another browser tab for this, because I'm going to ask you questions on YouTube, and you're going to answer using the other device or browser tab. I'll cover how you do that later. Most of the discussion is going to happen on Slack. You've probably already found Slack, but if you haven't, you can get to it through melbournecocoaheads.com, and the discussion will be on the Hash meetup channel. This way, you can ask questions there, and the presenter can get back to you if and when they can. There are lots of things on Slack. We've got Meetup for the chat about the Meetup, volunteers for the organisation stuff. We're quite open about how we organise CocoaHeads, so come and have a look. Jobs, if you're looking for work or workers, there's been a few jobs posted there today, actually. That's where you want to go. There's quite a lot there. I've known lots of people to get jobs through CocoaHeads. And speakers. If you want to do a talk, let us know. If you want some mentorship, if you're not quite ready to do a talk, let us know and we'll help you. The upcoming events, so you've made it to tonight, but the upcoming events, we've got next week on Wednesday at 6 p.m. We've been doing this hack night over Discord. It's working really well. If you've got a project or something you want to show us and just fiddle around with a bunch of people, then come and show it off. Or if you just need some help with your homework, whatever, come to CocoaHeads Hack Night. There's other fun stuff. Next week, I think it's on Thursday, that's Sydney CocoaHeads, and it's still broadcast online, so you can just go to that. There's GDG Melbourne, that's the sort of Android land thing, which you might be interested in. That's pretty cool. And the web, which covers a much more encompassing sort of general web stuff, which is pretty cool as well. And that's at meetup.com/theweb. We have a code of conduct. We've been finding this is working really well. If you've seen anyone who's uncomfortable, or if you're uncomfortable, we encourage you to speak out and let us know about it, or if you just have questions. We're trying to build a all-encompassing, welcoming community here, and we think we're doing pretty well, but we always can do better. So, what has Victoria and Melbourne shipped this month? Firstly, Reveal version 27. This is by Itty Bitty Apps. Reveal 27 has new features for UIKit in iOS 14 and a bunch of other fix-ups and general cleanups. The big thing is iOS 14 support, so that's really cool. Go and check that out. If you haven't already got it, you probably should. RHYNO 1.1. This is by Matt and Vlas, and this is the best MyKey app there is. It's super well designed. It just tells you how much money you've got on your MyKey, and it's well integrated into iOS, and I love it. I use it myself. I love it. TripLink. This is by Vignesh. It tells you how long you've got until the next train's going to be there at your favorite station. This is Vignesh's first app, and it's great. We love it. Thanks, Vignesh. If you've got an app that you've shipped and you want to tell us about it, go into Hash Meetup and tell us about it, because you should be proud of it. You worked hard. I want to thank our gold sponsor tonight, Itty Bitty Apps. Without them, we couldn't really do what we do. So thank you, Itty Bitty Apps. And our silver sponsors, Latitude Financial Services, REA Group, and Cognizant. First talk tonight. We've arrived at our first talk. This is Accessibility Tips by Rick. He's come from the web meetup to tell us about accessibility. So now it's over to you, Rick.
Well, thanks very much for having me. Today I'm going to talk a bit about mobile accessible development, what it is, why it's important, and a little bit about how we can go about making sure that our applications are accessible. So my name is Rick. You know that much already. I work for a company called Everest Engineering. I've been an engineer for a couple of decades, and here I do some engineering, solutions architecture, some other interesting things. And when I'm not playing with those guys, I play over at the web meetup. We've been running for, I think, 4 years now. We cover all sorts of different topics related to the web. We like to get people from different backgrounds talking about similar things. And it creates a really interesting conversation, which I'm really looking forward to being able to have when we get back into the same room. I also love my heavy metal. And I love accessibility, which is often abbreviated to A11Y. And the little metal hands in that logo appealed to me. But enough about that. Let's move on. What do we mean by accessibility? Well, really, what we're talking about is usability. It's making our applications usable by as many people as possible. We often think about accessibility being synonymous with equal opportunities. It's about giving everyone those equal opportunities, no matter their abilities or circumstances. Just like we shouldn't be able to exclude someone from a physical building because they're in a wheelchair, we mustn't exclude someone from a digital experience because they have, for example, a visual impairment. And another term that we often hear associated with accessibility is inclusive design, which is the process of thinking about including as many people as possible in the design process to make sure that what you're actually building is going to be usable by the widest group of people. So what sort of abilities should we consider in mobile applications? Well, there's a lot. The first that often comes to mind is vision. We want to be considering things like color contrast or focus state, text alternatives. And because of the way someone with visual impairment might be using your application, semantic markup, landmark elements are very, very important so that someone can navigate around using assistive technology such as screen readers. Cognition, which is one of them that is very often forgotten. Simple language is important, but also things like visited link style, which helps someone that might have memory issues. Not relying purely on icons, but also including text. Having text spacing around elements, avoiding time limits, and making sure there's input assistance, things like placeholders that explain how something might need to be used. We have physical impairments, so large touch areas are important, and also allowing for multiple input methods, not forcing someone to use one way of inputting data. Hearing as well. We need captions and media alternatives for anything that's going to be audible. And for those people that might be prone to seizures, we want to avoid large complex animations or flashing content. There's a lot of overlap there, and this list is of course not definitive. But also, it's important to think about, it's not just people with permanent disability that we're talking about. Here is part of a diagram taken from Microsoft's Inclusive Design Toolkit that shows some sorts of permanent disability that people might have, which is what we think about when we're talking about making something accessible. Someone who is blind obviously can't see. Someone who's deaf can't hear. But there's also temporary disability. If someone has an arm injury or perhaps is carrying some shopping, they're not going to be able to use a device with two hands. Maybe someone has a cataract and for a short period of time can't see. But there's also then the concept of situational disability. So I might be in a noisy place and therefore not able to hear very well. I might be distracted or looking at something else, therefore not able to see clearly. In this example, a new parent has their arms busy. So any one of us can benefit from something being accessible because we're all prone to situational disability. Now, last year, there was a report put out by PwC in partnership with Adobe and Microsoft called the Benefit of Designing for Everyone report. This focused on opportunities from 3 areas of Australia. And it found that within the education sector, Australians living with disabilities are considerably less likely to complete bachelor level qualifications or above compared with those without a disability. It looked at the retail product sector and found that 20% of Australians are unable to access and use goods appropriately. There's 20% of people that aren't able to shop the way many of us assume everyone can. Within financial services, almost 17% of Australian adults are financially excluded, which is significantly higher than other nations like the UK and France, where it's 2%. And this report found that within Australia, this is a collective opportunity of $20 billion to the annual economic benefit of Australia that we're missing out on. So the scale of this opportunity is really huge. We're talking big money, but also it's large numbers of people. In 2015, there was a survey of disability, aging and carers, and that found that 18% of the population is living with a disability, which in 2015 was over 4 million people. It's now 5 million. Now, of course, making your app accessible isn't going to reach another 20% of the population. But even if we just assume that 10% of those have trouble seeing, that's 500,000 people in Australia that we might be able to allow the services, the digital products that we build might allow them access to this. And these numbers match up with the 2016 annual report on the global economics of disability that found there's 1.3 billion people in the world that are suffering from disability. And of course, with lots of people comes lots of money. That report I just mentioned found that those with a disability have a disposable income of nearly $2 trillion. But it's not just those people that you can reach. That is 10% of the world's disposable income, but they influence their friends and their family. Collectively, that's another nearly $7 trillion market. So by making a product accessible, you're tapping into a potential market that's 40% of worldwide disposable income. People that are either directly affected by disability or know someone that is, which is a huge amount of money. Well, that's the opportunity cost, but there are other costs associated with avoiding accessibility. There's the cost of litigation. A lot of people don't realize that it's been a legal requirement for digital products to be accessible for 28 years in Australia. This is part of the 1992 Disabilities Act. And it has been updated to reflect the way we now use technology to a degree. But it was pretty simple. You must not exclude anyone from the products or services you provide. And people are using this to go to court. I found this quote that said, "The attorneys are telling us you can't fight this. There's nothing you can do. Just write them a check." And indeed, in 2018, and similar numbers were found in 2019, there were more than 2,000 website accessibility lawsuits filed in the USA. No lawsuit was thrown out. And after litigation, the fines, the expenses, you still have to become compliant as well. So there's lots of costs involved and lots of big names as well. In Australia, Coles was hit up by this 5 or 6 years ago. Their websites now are fantastic, but they were taken to court because their products were not accessible. And Target, Disney and Netflix in the US, all these people have gone to court. They've spent a lot of money trying to fight the decisions, but they've all lost. And even if you work for a company that doesn't have a red logo, I wouldn't like your chances. There's also the cost of retrofitting. Now, I don't particularly like this chart because the numbers are a little bit too convenient. But the illustration is that if you think about accessibility early on in the concept, it's going to be many factors cheaper than thinking about it during the build process or post-release. Now, these numbers are all factors of 10, looks very pretty in a chart, but it's probably rubbish. But some real numbers that I can talk about, not necessarily in the digital space, but in Queensland, They spent $4.4 billion building a new fleet of trains. And when they rolled them out, they found that the toilets weren't quite wide enough. The disabled toilets weren't quite wide enough for someone to get from a wheelchair onto a toilet seat. So they had to increase the size of those toilets by 10%. And it cost them $336 million because they hadn't considered the accessibility needs at any point in the process. And software is the same. If you don't have a diverse group of people working on the product, then you've got to be thinking as empathically as you can to try and think about how people are going to be using your product. Or it will cost you a lot to retrofit. Now, of course, accessible development is hard, otherwise everyone will be doing it, given those pretty compelling numbers. Learning any new skill is hard. I think development in many ways is like any other manufacturing business. We're builders, we're bricklayers. But if someone turned up to build your house and they said, I can do your walls, but I can't do windows because they're a bit hard, you wouldn't accept that. And so when we build our digital products, if something is hard, we shouldn't shy away from it. We owe it to ourselves to do a great job. We owe it to our clients to expose their products to the largest possible audience. And we owe it to that audience to represent them in the products that we create. So fortunately, there are guidelines out there that can help us find out what we need to do. What is often called the WCAG guidelines, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, gives you some indication of what you need to do. It classifies things as level A, which is a minimum level of conformance, level AA, which is what we normally go for, and AAA, which is a little bit hard to reach. So most people don't worry about that too much. But we should try and make things AA compliant. Now, this document is hundreds and hundreds of pages long. It's over 300 pages long. Dry reading. But there's a cheat sheet. And the WCAG checklist by WebAIM condenses this to 4 principles and 8 pages. And the principles look a little bit like this. This is principle number 1, content must be perceivable. And 1.1 is all about text alternatives. So images must have alt text. Images that do not convey information must be marked as decorative. Complex images must have alternatives. Form buttons must have descriptive values. Input fields must have labels. Embedded media must be identified, and frames must be titled. So that's a really compact checklist that will help make sure that your information is perceivable. Another one, principle 2, is operable, and here it talks about keyboard accessibility. Now, this may not be something that you think is applicable to mobile development, but it is a legal requirement, and for good reason. When we think of responsive design or serving up different experiences to mobile and desktop, we often think about it as content being different for different device size. But actually, I can be on a desktop machine, zoomed in, or explicitly set my user agent forcing a mobile display, whether that's a responsive site or an M.dot site. I can even use native applications in this way. And as someone that might need assistive technology, that is exactly what I do. I will use my desktop, I will zoom in on a screen, I will use keyboard and probably be exposed to a mobile view. So you need to be supporting desktop accessible features like keyboards and screen readers. Now, I've recently come across the ICT's Accessibility Testing Symposium methodology, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it was developed for the evaluation of accessibility of mobile websites. And it's an amalgamation of accepted accessibility testing standards from around the world. It talks about certain accessibility features that you must support. Native screen readers, being TalkBack on Android, VoiceOver on iOS, Narrator on Windows. Yes, some people are still using it. Volume control, haptic keyboard, visual, auditory, and vibration notifications, text-to-speech or speech recognition, and Zoom. All of these things must be supported for your mobile application to be considered accessible and compliant and legal. And there's also the system accessibility settings, the device-specific stuff, font size, touch and hold delays, screen rotations, high contrast, assistive touch, and mono audio. When we're testing our native apps, there are 2 main methods. We need to be testing on the devices, the mobile and tablets, and we need to be testing on those devices with the assistive technology. And if we're talking about mobile sites, which includes mobile applications or responsive sites, we must also be considering responsive windows and how it behaves on a desktop. So again, that means the keyboard and a screen reader like NVDA on Windows or VoiceOver on a OS X. Now, there's a bit of an overview here. There's 6 aspects to this methodology. Firstly, identifying the devices, which is for your mobile site, Safari on iPhone or iPad, Chrome on Android, and for native apps, it's making sure that you're looking at the latest version. So identifying the devices is easy. Then we want to identify the site types and variations. So is the functionality available on all the variations of a site, or when you zoom in, do you actually remove some of the functionality, as was the case with YouTube? When you zoomed in, you lost the ability to upload a video. So the desktop and the responsive experience and the M.dot experience, is everything still available on those variations? And each needs to be tested. And of course, testing when you zoom in. Defining the application functionality is important, because that's how you know whether functionally this thing is going to work for using the assistive technology and different devices. So some common things to be testing might be things like navigation or landing screens, different flows like login, account details that are very critical. Once you know that functionality, then you want to be testing the critical issues. So does the functionality work? But also here we're talking about traps. Now there are many more traps in mobile and native apps than desktop sites. And the trap is when a user is trapped within a component and cannot escape without closing the application or the browser. So an exit trap, where you need to make sure there is always an accessible item that closes any feature that overlays a page, such as a modal. And the key here is that it's an accessible item, not a button that you don't know what it is, but something that's read out by a screen reader, for example, clearly labeled, that will close a modal. Swipe and scroll traps. We have to ensure that we don't override these standard touch functions, because someone that can't see will rely on them. And if we're changing that behavior, they won't expect that. Layer traps. We mustn't trap someone on a non-visible layer. And again, the example with a modal, we might put a modal up, but if the focus stays behind that, then the user is on something that can't be seen. But for them, they don't know that it shouldn't be seen. And speech traps, which means that we must be able to pause media and speech. There are others, but these are the really key ones. So these are our critical issues that we must test against. Then there are mobile specific issues, and we can refer back to that cheat sheet, though, that 4 principles to cover off most of the mobile specific issues that we have here. They're just accessible standards. So providing text alternatives. We saw very clearly, I think, 8 different examples of how you might do this for different elements. Touch target size has a long time been considered to be about 44 pixels, which translates to about 8 millimeters on a screen. Got to make sure there's enough space for someone perhaps with tremors to easily touch the targets, and also then create space between them, so that there is no ambiguity over what we're tapping and touching. We want to use standard UI elements for input, because when we use standard elements, we get all of the accessibility functions for free. So it will tap into the core speech voiceover technology within your device if you're using a native drop-down element. But if you decide to build one yourself, you've got to build all of the accessibility features into there. And that includes many more things than just being able to read out and select. You must clearly label your form fields and use navigational aids. So back buttons that are visually obviously back buttons. Maybe they announce that, talk about navigation and so on. And finally, you must test the mobile assistive technology and feature support. Because writing great code is wonderful, but unless you're testing it, you don't know if it's working or not. And we're talking about conformance, but really we're going for usability. So we need to be using our applications the same way our audience might use them to know that we've done a good job. So this is now, we're talking about voiceover or talkback, depending on the operating system. Must have that keyboard support, even though it kind of seems counterintuitive for a mobile app. keyboard and switch. Zoom or magnification, again, it's just a terminology difference between the platforms. You must test inverted colors and also grayscale. And different reader views, or in Android, increased text size and simplified view. So that's the methodology covered. It's pretty simple. You can find out a lot more detail if you want, but really this is the top level. You're going to cover most things by considering just these few different areas. And that cheat sheet, I can't emphasize enough how many times that's helped me. If you want to know a little bit more about actually how to use the mobile assistive technology, I recommend searching for Hardy Callahan's articles on the subject. They're very clear. I'm not just going to leave you with a few final thoughts. Accessibility is a legal requirement and it makes good business sense, so it is something we should consider. Refer to that checklist. Test the mobile accessibility features. Test your device accessibility features. Test on different devices with assistive technology. And if you want to hear a little bit more about this, tomorrow, AliCamp is an accessibility conference. It's in its second day tomorrow. It's free to attend, and there are 2 talks in the morning around mobile accessibility. I'll be around on Slack. Feel free to ask me any questions you like. If I don't get to them today, I will, at the earliest convenience. I'm always happy to chat about this. Love your comments or any thoughts. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Rick. I think that's really good, and it brings home a few points about testing, but also the number of people who have needs that we need to take care of. I turned on some analytics in one of the apps that I wrote, and it's got about 150,000 people, and we were surprised that up to 10% of people use the accessibility text sizes on their phones. So that's made me really glad that we'd spent some time to put dynamic type support in. Next up tonight, we've got RHYNO. He's going to talk about some sharp edges he's found in Combine.
Good day, everyone. My name is RHYNO, and tonight I'm going to present, like you said, some sharp edges about Combine. So first of all, what I currently do is that I am the iOS lead at Jawboard, and we do some real-time PDF collaboration software. And in order for that real-timeness to really work, we have made heavy use of Combine in the last year or so, and I've used Combine in other projects before that. So I got pretty comfortable with it, and with my experience working with it, I've identified some very, very sharp edges that I want to advertise to the world and basically say you will hit these problems yourself. And so I want to warn everyone about these bugs that are currently in the framework or were in the framework before. This is not a talk. This is not an introductory talk about Combine at all. This is very advanced. I'm not going to explain how a reactive framework works. So, unfortunately, if you don't really know how that works, you'll have to look for a tutorial on that first. Anyhow, here it is. My talk is just basically looking at Xcode, like I always do, looking at a bunch of code, and we're going to just be watching some unit tests that describe the kind of bugs that that Combine has. So just to start, you can see here I've got this exit test case class. I just got some very random, setup. I just got a cancelable property to just store a cancelable while the tests are running, because I'm going to have a pipeline that I want to obviously store somewhere and not cancel until the test finishes. I have a setup where I need out the cancelable, and I have a tear down where I need out the cancelable. Very standard stuff to test some RX, some reactive pipelines. And yeah, let's start right away with the first bug that I call the switch to latest fiasco. And this is, so let's look at that test, right? And I'm going to try to describe as much as possible what it's supposed to do and what the expected result is. So first of all, obviously, I've got an expectation that I'm creating to just validate that something will happen eventually. And that's going to be really the only thing I'm expecting in this test. And then I'm going to create that stream, that pipeline using Combine. And that pipeline just emits a void value here that is mapped to another pipeline, right? I'm having an inner pipeline, and this pipeline is going to compute the answer to the life, the universe, and everything. And because that takes a bit of time to compute, I'm just going to simulate that computation. I'm just going to say it's going to be delayed for like a second. It takes a lot of time to calculate 42. And right after that, I'm gonna use switch to latest, which switches to the latest publisher that comes upstream from Combine. So very standard stuff. And at the end, obviously, I'm syncing everything, and I'm basically saying, you know what? If I get a value out of that, whether it's 42 or anything else, actually, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to fulfill the expectation. And obviously, the last line of that test is I'm going to wait for that expectation to be fulfilled. I'm going to give it 3 seconds, which is plenty, which should be plenty, because here computing 42 just takes 1 second. So very straightforward test. I assume that everybody can follow that. And yeah, let's run it. And it's running on a simulator off screen, so you can't really see what's going on, but it's running. And so you can see, hey, it just passed. It actually did exactly what I expected it to do. And 42 has been calculated, and the expectation has been fulfilled. Everything is all right. Only that, if you look up, and I don't know if that comes well with the resolution, but I'm running iOS 14.2, and I'm going to switch simulators. I'm going to go to an iPhone 11 running iOS 13.3, and I'm going to run the test again. Let's run the test again on this simulator with iOS 13.3. And now we're seeing that the test fails. And this describes basically a well-discussed problem on the Swift forums, actually, that a lot of people identified right away with Combine when it got released, which is that switch to latest had the wrong behavior. And that wrong behavior is that switch to latest doesn't forward any value being computed in the publisher that it switches on if the upstream completes before that. So what do I mean by that is that if you actually look at what is being emitted by all of the publishers, right? Here we have a void value followed by a completion, because the just operator emits a value and then immediately completes the stream. This pipeline emits nothing for like a second, then it emits, that's a second. Let's put some brackets to say this is actually a time duration, and it's going to emit 42, and then it's going to emit a completion. The problem here with switch to latest in iOS 13.3 is that this pipeline, this void followed by completion, will complete before 42 is calculated, and switch to latest will ignore the result of that calculation if that pipeline has completed before the result is calculated. And that's completely against every other reactive framework. Like, even though the upstream completes, it should let the last publisher that it subscribed to emit its value before it itself completes. There's a long discussion on Swift forums, and eventually Apple acknowledged that this was a critical issue, and they fixed it in iOS 13.4. So everything is good. The only thing is that if you want to use Combine and you want to support something which is less than iOS 13.4, be really worried about that bug, because this will bite you. If you do not have, let's say, a suite of tests and some CI machines that run constantly on a version of iOS that has this bug, this will bite you. This will impact your customers. This is so easy to basically stumble upon. This happened to me like I don't know, like a dozen times since that happened. And so you can miss it very easily because the latest iOSs have that fixed. But anyway, I'm just going to warn you, it's very well discussed and documented on Swift forums, and so far it's been fixed, which is great. So that was a switch to latest fiasco, which you have to understand if you want to start using Combine in your code. Very, very sharp edge here. Now the next unit test I'm going to show you is I'm called that Combine latest losing data. So let's just uncomment that thing. So same thing, I've got an expectation I'm creating right at the start of the unit test, and I'm also going to wait for that expectation at the end to complete, right? So this preamble and that suffix, we don't really care about. It's just a matter of testing that the unit test actually works. And this is a pipeline I'm writing, right? We have, I'm using combine latest, and I'm going to combine two streams. I'm going to combine this one and this one, and then they will both sync into a sync. And this sync just validates that, hey, if I get true for both, I'm going to fulfill the expectation. And that should work because if you look at the pipelines, what they do is that, for example, this one emits false, then waits for 0.5 seconds, then emits true, then completes. And this one kind of does the same thing, but it waits a little longer. It waits for 1 second, then emits true, and then completes. And let's run that test. Let's just run it. So I'm running the tests. I should let me just comment out the previous test so that we don't have to look at that anymore. There you go. And anyway, this test has run and everything is working fine. Everything that I expect is working. Like these two pipelines emit false, then wait a bit, then emit true, false, wait a bit, emit true. Eventually, I get both of these value true. The expectation is fulfilled before the timeout of 3 seconds is reached. Everything is as I expect. Until, let's say that in the sync, instead of just this very simple, check and a fulfillment, that's not much computation. Let's say that this sync, which is really what I mean is downstream, right? It's a downstream operation. Let's say that this sync is computationally expensive. And I'm going to simulate that by just adding a sleep. I'm just going to say I'm going to sleep 1 second. Let's imagine you are doing a big diff of some collection data. You are calculating which sections and items need to be removed and inserted into a table. There's lots of reasons why something might take a bit of time to basically do something before it returns and starts processing more values again. So let's do that. And let's run the test again. All I'm doing is simulating some computation, right? So I'm going to add simulating computation, and this should fail. So let me see. Why is it not failing right now? I'm going to switch my simulator to just make sure that everything is flushed. And it is not. Let's see. Oh, this is awkward. What is going on? Oh, there you go. There you go. I finally got what I wanted. So I didn't make anything compute longer than necessary, right? I'm waiting for everything for 3 seconds, and nothing really takes more than a second here. There's a second here. I'm sleeping here for another second. Actually, I might be doing something wrong here. I'm gonna test again. It's working again. I've got a gist to show. I don't understand why it's working again right now. I've tested that many times, but it doesn't matter. In any case, let's pretend this fails. I don't understand why it's not failing right now. There's something that I missed or I changed just before starting that presentation. But the problem, basically, that you can see by simulating a computation is that combine latest is an operation that does a best effort, right? It doesn't necessarily emit all the elements that it receives. If it receives ABC on one side and DEF on the other side, it will only ever, when it's allowed to execute it will only ever emit the latest values it has received. So if it emits ABC on one side, and let's pretend that the C value takes a long time to compute in the end, and then on the other side you receive DEF, it will completely toss away the DE values and only emit the F value. It doesn't present to you, it doesn't start emitting the values that have already been received in the past. And that's okay, like as long as it's sending the latest values it has received, it's totally fine. The problem here, and that's what I should really be showing in that example, and again, I'm trying to understand why it's not working, is that when a pipeline that it combines completes, it completely dismisses that latest value. So in that case, that test should literally fail, because here, while it emits the first value, it emits false and false. So it receives false and false. Then after 0.5 seconds, a value of true will be emitted by this pipeline. The value received by the sink will now be true and false, and it will sleep on it for like it will sleep simulating that computation. Then, while that computation is being performed, this other pipeline will now awake after the delay and emit a true value as well, and then immediately complete. The problem is that that value that is emitted, that true value that is emitted while that sink is still busy performing computations. And it completes immediately after that. And when it completes immediately after that, the combined latest, when it's done, when the sink is done, when the downstream is done, that pipeline the combined latest will basically completely dismiss the fact that the latest value it has received on that branch is a true value. It will only consider the completion, meaning that the sequence that you should see really is that this downstream receives false, false, followed by true, false. I'm just gonna put a little hyphen here, and then it completes. And that's the thing, right? It never receives that final value from that second pipeline. And that's a huge problem, because you basically lost data. You lost the final value of that pipeline. And that's a very sharp edge. That actually is, obviously in a unit test, it's hard to see when it happens. But I can tell you that this is a fairly common pattern if you're doing, for example, networking calls. Networking calls are one-shots. You do one call, you get the values, you combine multiple network calls together, they also send completions because they're basically done. And somehow you find that the combined latest hasn't really combined the result, the response from all these network calls at all. It has completely forgotten one of them. And after many, many hours of debugging, you find out that no, the value is emitted. The problem is the combined latest operator completely forgets about that final value because it receives that completion right after that. And while it received that value, it was busy doing computations downstream, passing that value, that previous value to other operators downstream. So yeah, very, very sharp edge. It took me a while to track this down, because you never expect your reactive framework to have bugs, but this one is very, very sharp. I posted on the 3 forums about that. I got a gist on GitHub. Nobody ever replied to it, but this is going to bite a lot of people if this doesn't get fixed soon. Anyway, let's forget about this one. Somehow my failure of the test got stolen. So very unfair. So very unfair. My final unit test, the final sharp edge, is what I call the publish shenanigans. And publish shenanigans. So I'm going to explain again the test. Again, I've got an expectation right away, and I've got another wait for that expectation at the end. 1 second is plenty. It doesn't matter. Like, it's really doesn't matter time. But in that case, we don't really have a delay going on. And what I'm doing is that I have a published property here. Published properties are great. They're used everywhere, including especially for Swift UI. And I'm basically building a pipeline with that published property. And what I'm doing is kind of like a smell in reactive programming. And I'm going to explain that in a second. But I'm going to get the published value of that property. I'm going to map that. I'm going to resubscribe to that published value inside the map. Right? I'm doing a map switch to latest. So I'm retaking that value, which really doesn't make any sense. But it can happen if you have what is called a diamond graph fairly easily. So as you combine, as you build a complex pipeline of many, many things, it's very easy to actually build something which is equivalent to that, because you don't notice that what you have created is a diamond graph. In any case, this is still valid. This is a smell. This is not the best this doesn't make any sense as far as like logic is concerned, but this is totally allowed. I mean, I should be able to do that. There's no problem with that. And again, I'm syncing that, and I'm just checking that the value that I receive is 42. So I'm starting with 0, and after the pipeline is built, I'm basically assigning 42 to foo. And let me run that on iOS 13.3. And let's run these tests, building fast. And everything is working fine. I am basically, foo is emitting something, I don't really care. Then I'm mapping to foo as well, switching to the latest, but eventually I get that value 42 received down the line, right? I'm expecting that to be emitted by the foo variable here because I'm subscribing to it. So that makes complete sense. The test works, that's what I expect. But now let me switch to iOS 14.2 and run the test again. There's something about my simulator where I'm not necessarily like, this is wait. I need to run the test multiple times for the simulator to actually switch, but it's failing now on iOS 14.2. So that is, I don't know what to call it. It's a regression, I guess, in Combine in iOS 14. So Combine is not only just like fixing bugs, it's actually introducing new bugs as it goes. And this is a new behavior / bug in iOS 14. And that's the thing that if you subscribe to a published variable as it is emitting, you will be receiving the previous value of that published variable. So this will emit 0, and it will never emit the next value that it has been assigned to. So this is basically what I'm doing, right? I'm basically doing a very clumsy pipeline, but again, it's easy to get something built like that, where as foo emits, because it has received a value of 42, I am resubscribing to it in it as it's being mutated, right? Like the mutation is happening, and I'm resubscribing to it synchronously. I will never receive that foo 42 value, and I can double check. I can put a print just to double check what we're getting, and we can check that. There you go. It was here. There you go. We got received subscription, unlimited value 0, value 0. I never get a 42, and at this point I'm canceling that basically because the test is finished. So that has also beat us as well because we had a few clumsy pipelines written with diamond graphs, and suddenly in iOS 14 things did not work well. And that's something that we found out in Combine, and that's something that also will beat people, I'm sure. So it will bite people. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think this is expected. I definitely think this is a bug. We should definitely have foo emit the latest value eventually. You can have a debate whether foo should receive the previous value as it's being mutated and then the new value, or just get the new value. But either way, you should always receive the new value, and in that case, we don't. Therefore, we also lose data. And yeah, that's a very, very sharp edge as well, and it took me a while to figure that one out. So these were 3 combined sharp edges that in the last year and a half have beat me in many, many ways. And yeah, like I've spent hours and hours trying to figure that out, especially as iOS versions seem to matter. iOS 13 has different behaviors than iOS 14. Some fixes are in iOS 14, but obviously, like I showed you, iOS 14 seems to have introduced some new kinds of bugs. So anyway, if you intend to start using Combine, be really wary, be really careful. This is not fully a fleshed out framework, and yeah, there are some sharp edges in it. And yeah, that's my talk.
Okay, thank you, Renaud. It's good to know for a lot of us who have been doing RX and reactive programming for a little while that we're now adopting Combine, there's stuff we've got to be aware of. Okay, it's time for the quiz. This is something we've not done before in CocoaHeads, so we'll see how we go. So you might be saying, a quiz, how do we do this? Step 1, we're going to go to kahoot.it on another device. You might do this in another browser tab. You might do this on a phone you've got lying around, whatever. Then it's going to give you a web page, and you're going to enter in a PIN. I'll tell you what the PIN is very soon. You'll enter a name, and that'll be just your name, like Neil or Tim, whatever your name is. And step 4, answer. As I ask the questions, you'll get given 4 colors and 4 shapes. And as I ask the questions, there'll be an answer associated with each shape. And you just tap on the shape associated with what you think the correct answer is. It matters how fast you go. So you've got 20 seconds or thereabouts to answer the question. If you answer really quickly, you'll get more points. So try to answer quickly, but take your time. Don't panic. So I'm just going to continue sharing my screen and drop out of Keynote for a sec. Jump over to a web browser. Actually, I'm going to jump over to Kahoot and show you. This is what you're going to look at, right? So I'm going to press play. I'm going to host. And that'll do. I'm going to press classic. So here's the game pin. In a moment, I'm going to turn off the silly music. There we go. So game pin is 9885133. Put the game pin in your Kahoot web page. And I'll wait a few minutes just for everyone to get here. We've got Fake Hugh, Vignesh, Matt, 4 Seasons, very clever, Vignesh. Everybody's coming in. This is good. 8 people. I don't know how many people I'm expecting. Okay, so we've got about 20-something people on the stream, so we need a few more. Jump on, everyone. Sup. Daniel, hello. Hope you're feeling lucky, because a lot of the questions are probably pretty weird. Wait, just a few more seconds for any stragglers. I think I'm pretty happy with 11 people, but also if you are on the stream now and you don't get on for the first question or two, it doesn't matter. You can join halfway through the game. It doesn't really matter too much. So I'm going to go full screen. Everyone can see this. I'm going to press start. Here we go. You ready? CocoaHeads 2020 11. Oh, here comes the quiz. What framework has this logo? You've got 20 seconds. Is it Core Audio? Is it Core Data? Core Foundation? Or Core Network? You see this logo, what framework are you thinking of? Should be able to answer it. It was Core Audio. Well done to those who answered it. That was, you don't see the logos very often these days, but it was Core Audio. Well done to those who got it right. When was Codable added into Swift? Was it Swift 1, Swift 3, Swift 4, or Swift 2? The questions are out of order, so just be careful as you're answering these. Swift 4 is on yellow. Just be a little careful. Swift 3 is on green. Swift 1 is on blue, so it's not in the right order. Well done to everyone who got that right, but I did leak it a little bit by telling you which answer was. Never mind. Next question. Who's winning? Bok is winning. 4 Seasons, very clever, and Frank Cool. What's the result of the comparison? So you've got a little bit of code here. Let color 1 equals UI color white 1 over 25, and let color 2 white 1.0 over 255.0. And are they true, false, or is it a compiler error? Oh, I didn't expect that. Okay, no, it turns out that's true. Swift can work that one out. Next, who's winning now? Lee, congratulations. It's very close now. Going to catch up to Bok. Mac Catalyst apps, use a scaling factor on Catalina. What's the factor? 75%, 77%, 90%, or 73%? So when you look at on Catalina, if you look at a Catalyst app, it scales it a little bit. How much does it scale it by? It scales it by 77%, which freaks me out because I thought it would be something more even, like 75 or 50. But on Big Sur, I don't think it does it. I think you can turn it off on Big Sur. Who's winning? Still the same people, but the best is catching up. What classic dev tool had this icon? Stretch back far into your memories, your childhoods, into your classic Mac dev days if you had them. Was it Mac Warrior, ResEdit, Jack in the Mac, or Mac Edit? You might have used this to cheat at video games, as I did. It was ResEdit. Well done to everyone who got that. That's good. Well done to everyone who got that right. That's really good. Oh, people are changing on this leaderboard here. Which of these is a SwiftUI view? Is it image view, grid, secure field, or table? So one of them is a SwiftUI view. The others are not. Which one is it? You might not have done much SwiftUI yet, but you have to think. It's a little tricky. I might have thrown you off with image view because there is image, but it's not called image view. In fact, it's secure field. Who's winning? Oh, Box still winning, but people are catching up. More quiz. What 993 Mac is this? You might not have one of these Macs. I happen to have one of these Macs, and I think it's cool. Hey, it's from 1993, and it's very, very old, and it lives in the attic at my mum's place, but I still think it's cool. It's Quadra 630, LC 630, Quadra 840AV, or Paramax 7200 120. Well done to any of you who guessed that correctly. I don't know if I would have got that right if I was doing this quiz. Well done, Frank Cool and Four Seasons are leaping ahead there. What's the simulator keyboard shortcut to open an app in Reveal? So if you're in the simulator and you're looking at your app, you want to open it in Reveal, what's the shortcut? You might not know you could do this. Is it Command R, Command Shift Up Arrow, Command Shift E, or Command Shift R? Maybe today's the day you learn. You can press Command Shift E and it'll open your app straight in Reveal. I find that really handy and I use it all the time. Next question. Ooh, Box still ahead. Be Best and Frank Cool and Fake You. Come on, man. What app is this? What app was this? So WhatKit, Web Saver, Work Saver, or Workflow? Starts with a W. Well done, everyone. It's now known as shortcuts or something else. I don't use it very often, but well done, everyone. Fake Hugh, he's now in the top 3. Come on, man. Rooting for Fake Hugh. What does the following Swift return? So it's an empty array, all satisfy, and then false. Just that function at the end that returns false. Empty array, all satisfy, and a function that just returns false. Is it compile error, true or false? The answer is true. It's an empty array. Empty arrays all satisfy anything. Doesn't matter what question you ask it. Always satisfies. Four Seasons has leapt up. He could get to the top. Which of these is not an Apple framework? Is it ClockKit, CareKit, MetalKit, or NewsKit? You might use these kits, you might not. but one of them, everyone got that right. It's NewsKit. There we go. No, well, sorry, I beg your pardon. Nearly everyone got that. No, actually, 2 people got that right. Beg your pardon. Oh well, I made up NewsKit just today. It was fun. Ooh, there's so much changing in here. What's the output of the following code? So you have to look a bit carefully. Var animal equals cow, and then let some code is a closure. It takes the animal, captures the animal, and then prints the name of the animal, and then I change the name of the animal afterwards, and then I run that code. Is it horse, compiler error, or cow? Is it the original value, or is it one I changed it to? Interesting. Okay, so it's subtle because it's a value type. So I think, that one's subtle. You've got to. It's captured that value in the closure, so it's not going to change after you change it. Well done. We're getting some high scores here. Coming into the last questions. What's this icon? You might not have seen this icon before. Is it an early Xcode beta? Is it Project Builder, Interface Designer, or Interface Builder? You do need music, or you just need me singing. Interface Builder. So it used to be a separate app, but it's not a separate app anymore. But that was its icon. That was its most recent icon before it got folded in. Fake Hugh. He's on second now. Come on, man. I believe in you. You're my fake buddy. When was macOS 10 10.0 released? And I'm not including the betas. This is stretch your mind back 20 years, or maybe nearly 20 years. March 2000, March 2001, July 2000, or September 2001. I've forgotten. Here's the answer. March 2001. Well done to everyone. People thought it might have been September because that's our cadence now. But in those days, we weren't up to a cadence. Which framework has the following types? I've taken the little prefix off this. It's 2-letter prefix. Which framework has the following types? You haven't got long. It's a QuickTime, Core Location, Foundation, or MapKit. Circle, Local Search, and Geodesic Polyline. I didn't even know how to say that last one. It was MapKit. Probably the Geodesic Polyline gives it away. And that was the last question. So now we know. Now we're going to know who's going to win. Is it Fake Hugh? Come on. Matt Delves at number 3. Number 2, Be Best. Well done, man. Number 1, Spotlight. Bok. I reckon Bok. I knew Bok would win. I knew it. I'll runners up Fake Hugh at 4 and Daniel at 5. Well done. I thought that was fun. We'll do that again, I think, because that worked pretty well. I will now switch back to my keynote. And it remains for me to say thanks for coming. These are the links from which you can get all the Melbourne CocoaHeads information about our next meetups. Join us on Slack to talk and to ask questions about hard Cocoa questions. Twitter, we'll tell you about the events on Twitter. YouTube, all the past videos. These videos will be uploaded soon in the next few weeks. The next event, CocoaHeads Hack Night, virtual event via Discord. That's on the 18th of November. I'm sorry I don't have the date up on the screen, but it's on the 18th of November. I'll tweet about it and you'll know about it from that. So you're going to share your screen and show your work or help someone out on their project. If you've got homework, if you're a student, you want help with your homework, we can help you out. Or you're just trying to think of some ideas, come there, 18th of November. And we'll put the details on a meetup or Slack in Hack Night. The next event is CocoaHeads number 143. That's in December. So usually we do a kind of a special occasion thing for December, but I don't know what we're going to have this year. We'll think about it and just watch this space. We'll let you know. That's it. That's the end. That's my slides. Press play again. Thanks for coming, everyone. I think we're going to call that the end of tonight. There'll be a little Zoom meeting afterwards, and join us for a beer and a bit of a powwow.